Wait, this thing is big? Why does every picture of it make it look smaller than a Legends figure? It's Legacy Arcee. Seriously, this character needs its own name, because there are like 3 or 4 completely different characters all with the name Arcee, and only half of them look alike. It's getting to the point where it's like, this is my friend Becky, Becca, Rebecca, and Slutty Rebecca. Anyways, yeah, Legacy here is actually way bigger than I ever thought she was going to be. I mean, she's not huge, but she's taller than Kingdom Warpath, who is now what is considered large for a typical deluxe. She's thin, but I was expecting something like a third to a half shorter. Boy, is there egg on my face, by the way. I sat there crapping all over the idea that this was going to turn into Road Rocket, only for there to be leaked listings now that that's what's happening. I don't know how someone guessed that that was going to happen based on this design, because it's nothing like Road Rocket other than it's a motorcycle. Anyways, lots of people hate this thing, and I totally understand why. This is so brutally compromised by it being a pre-tool, it's not even funny. Like I said before, waist is way too short, chest is way too long, head is square when it should be triangular, legs should not have this kibble hanging off the sides, and the Road Rage shoulder tires should not be hovering behind her back. So yeah, we are already off to a bad start. But what if I told you this thing is actually kind of good? And I'm baffled as to how this doesn't suck. First skids, then this bad idea. Why are they putting their whole asses into these wastes of time? Anyways, this looks a lot better in hand than I initially anticipated. It's perhaps a bit more mannish and androgynous than it looked in the product photography, but the colors are good, the build feels great, nothing is loose or broken on mine, this has a deceptively high amount of paint, it's mostly well proportioned except for the hips, which are somehow mounted below the crotch and they are bracketed off the body on these barbells. The shoulder tires are actually kind of a cool addition that give the figure some pizzazz I think the original design was lacking. And if you don't like them, then they are a fully optional piece that you can either mount inside the backpack or leave off to the side altogether so you don't have to deal with it. You can even use it as a pizza cutter for the Energon pizza she comes with. You also have the option, for some reason, of entirely removing the backpack except for the handlebars, making it much less pronounced, though perhaps a bit uglier. This feels like a manufacturing mistake, like this part was supposed to be glued down and never was. But it does give us a good look at this part, and here we can see that for once, on the tiny motorcycle character no less, they handled clear plastic right, by having it be a separate piece that mounts into a solid plastic shell.
And there was much rejoicing.
Without the backpack, this does look a lot more like the character it's supposed to be. And honestly, if it weren't for the consistent proportional issues throughout this thing, it would actually look just like her. Seriously, if this was just resculpted a bit, this could have been a great rendition of her design. I don't see why they couldn't just fix the issues this had. Are the retools just not going to change anything but the head or something? Cause this is just inches from being what it should have been, and the problems it has shouldn't have been problems. This isn't a failure of engineering, this isn't lazy design, this isn't a heinously ugly sculpt, this isn't bad QC, this isn't crap materials, it's just a sculpt that makes the character look less like themselves. Fans Toys makes figures that look like stunt doubles of the characters, but what this looks like is cosplay. It's someone who doesn't really look like Arcee, putting on some blue clothes and a bicycle helmet and calling themselves by the name. I don't mean to harp on and on about this, but it's so frustratingly close to what it needed to be, especially when almost every other aspect of this figure is good. There is a great figure in here buried underneath an inappropriate sculpt. It does look like her, emphasis on the word like. It doesn't look like it is her, it just looks like her, similar to her. And the fault of that doesn't really fall on the head sculpt. The head sculpt is okay. It's better in hand than it looked in pictures, feeling a bit less square and a little more effeminate. And I'm absolutely not in the camp of people who's up in arms that she now has a nose. I personally always hated the lack of noses on the Prime designs. I know they are supposed to be alien robots and all, but it always just annoyed me when I looked at it. One thing I never noticed throughout the whole show is that the face crest is supposed to be pink. All the colors in that series were so muted they just looked silver to me. I can even look at pictures now, and at best I'm like, I guess it's kind of pink, a bit, maybe? I'm clearly not the only one with this problem, because whoever artist made this pic thought that she was gold. So clearly the pink wasn't clear in the original show, but it's almost like every figure designer of her thought her crest was as pink as it is in this pic, because all the figures of her seem to have gotten that color way more saturated than it was normally. Though only for the most part, because every accent color on her was supposed to be pink, and depending on the lighting, for me, a lot of this stuff will turn out silver, or maybe pink to my eye. I guess for the question of the video, should they embrace the silver or actually lean into the pink eventually? And then this is why I hate light piping. It's better concealed here than on most figures because the blues pretty closely match up, but how does the whole back of her head channel the light so little through her eyes? In the dark, her eyes are lifeless. In low shade, her eyes are lifeless. And in bright light, her eyes are lifeless. Light piping fucking sucks. Give me chromed eyes or give me death. So as much as I bitched up a storm about this design, this is actually a really good looking figure. It just doesn't look right for the character. But if we weren't trying to compare it to that, on an objective level, the only problems this would actually have is the hips are mounted in a weird place, and the leg kibble is really ugly. I feel like they could have put the half tires on a hinge that could have flipped them around to the backs of the knees. It's not like it would have interfered with the articulation at all. Accessories on this are kinda crap. Like this is some stupid shit she comes with. I don't know if you want to count this, but you can kind of maybe pretend the front of her alt mode is something. It could maybe pass as some kind of shield if you can figure out how to mount it. Then she comes with her front tire, which is pretty well painted, and you can split that apart, which is very hard to do without a tool, to form not a gun at all. Really? This is your weapon? It's got like two 1mm long barrels mounted behind a set of pan magazines. You seriously couldn't ship her with like an extension that clamps onto here, you know, like give it maybe 1 iota of intimidation factor? Instead she comes with a trash can lid. What the fuck is this supposed to be, a Beyblade? I think this might be the dumbest accessory I've ever handled. You can split them apart and slap them onto her forearms to, finger quotes, form the wrist blades she had in the show. These look literally nothing like them. We are one Energon weapon in, and they are already completely out of ideas, it seems. The best thing she comes with is the front wheel, and that's only because maybe you could say it's a drone or like a helicopter backpack, maybe like Windblade's shoulder turbines, but everything you do with them is up to your own imagination, because these are not doing any of the work for you. Otherwise, you get a useless trash can lid, pizza pie looking Energon disc, and part of an alt mode. So these accessories suck something foul, and I cannot believe they had no better ideas. It is so bad at this point, I'm trying to give it credit for a part that comes off that was probably supposed to be glued down. At least posability is better than average. Head with way more than average tilt up and a little more side to side, normal 90 shoulders, normal 90 elbows, wrist swiv, which I did not expect with this design, back crunch and side to side at the waist, unimpeded legs, slightly less than 90 knees with the same weird double joint that the Bumblebee Brawn had, so that doesn't help, feet with a stiff toe down and ankle tilts. So yet another figure from the last month or so with side to side at the waist. Is this becoming a common chug joint? It'd be a welcome addition. And overall, it's pretty much average or better than average. The only problem I find with this figure is the knees leave a little to be desired, but otherwise this does a good job on the posing front. Now transformation I found to be impossible the first time, even with directions, because mine was misassembled. Yeah, the waist was attached backwards on mine, and that might not sound like a big deal, you know, just rotate it, but the thing is only designed to bend in one direction, so with it on backwards and it just couldn't transform. I spent like 40 minutes attempting to transform the damn thing with the legs sticking up off the back of the alt mode in an impossible fashion, trying to figure out how to wrap them around to where they needed to go. The front tire and the rear were touching, and I just could not understand what was going on. Eventually I realized that something had to be wrong, and I fixed it myself, after much swearing. And then the process to transform this is a little fiddly and not incredibly memorable, but it's not a bad one, especially since the parts forming is optional. If you don't go for the shoulder turbine look, then you don't have to do anything with the tire, and you can just leave it on, which is nice, and it makes this girl better than Earthrise Cliffjumper. And the result is probably one of the most solid-looking motorcycles in Transformers history. Between this and Wreck-Gar, Hasbro has been doing great at a type of figure that used to suck. This is a little too wide where you'd have to sit, but honestly it's not that bad, and every other detail is on point. Anything that's robot kibble looks enough like an engine, anything that's not looks like an actual bike. It's really got pretty much everything it needs, including a turning front tire, though the clearances can make that a bit rough. Other figures can easily ride this, and you can take the stupid pizza and give it the worst kneecappers in the history of vehicular combat, or you can attach them to the seat to kill who would ever try to ride it. I think we can all agree that Prime would have been infinitely better if she had these, so Jack would never try to ride her, and then the humans wouldn't have gotten involved, so we could just have a show about the Transformers and not focus on the stupid meat creatures who suck and ruin everything they touch. So this is a pretty good looking and functional alt mode, when that's normally not really an option for most motorcycle figures, and a surprisingly good figure. I can't believe it. I can't believe they pulled it out twice. First, they make a Skids that people will actually enjoy despite the fact that the character, Borderline, doesn't exist. And yes, I know he had a big role in IDW. I read the whole comic. The character named Skids in there was great and gets so disrespected by the end. But the Legacy figure isn't a version of that character, it's a version of the G1 character. Anyways, and they managed to make this thing that looks terrible from a distance into a solid figure. Its worst two features are that due to the clear pre-tooling goals, it winds up being an uncanny valley version of the character it's supposed to be, only really looking like them if you squint, kind of like early MMC figures, and then the accessories suck, which doesn't even really matter. One of them can be kind of cool as a jetpack, and it's not like accessories have ever been make or break for the quality of a figure. But otherwise, despite looking wrong, it does feel more correct in hand, and it's at least decent looking ignoring that. The posability is pretty good with its extra ab action, and having more range at the head than normal. It also doesn't really have any trouble standing. The transformation is okay, and at least it leads to one of the best cycle bots of all time. It's kind of hard to get past the fact, though, that this could have been the definitive Prime C. Other C, Legacy of all time. Seriously, we need to come up with a different name for her. And by just fucking up the sculpt, they completely kneecapped that. It doesn't even look more G1 like Bulkhead, it just looks wrong. And if they just bothered to get her a little more right, no one would have complained. There's nothing even in the transformation preventing them from doing it. This is a good figure, but it has one of the most baffling, pointless missteps ever in her design. And that's not half what I have to say, but it's enough what I have to say. And I know, you know, what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So, if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.